I thought it was just another Saturday morning. Sun pouring through the blinds, the smell of coffee thick in the air, my old sneakers squeaking against the kitchen tile. I grabbed my keys and texted my daughter, Zoe, that I was going to take her car to wash it, without thinking to ask first. She was in college, busy with her friends and her own life, and I figured she'd appreciate coming home to a clean ride. Pulling into the driveway, I could see her car waiting, humming with the promise of a new day. I popped the trunk just to check for any trash she might have left behind. That's when I froze. There, hidden under a blanket of fast food wrappers and gym bags, was a small cardboard box. My heart skipped. The box wasn't labeled, but I could see the outline of something metallic inside. At first I thought maybe it was some kind of gift or a forgotten tool. But the shape, the weight, something didn't sit right. I stared at it, every instinct in me screaming that I should close the trunk and leave it alone. But curiosity had a stronger grip. I knelt, fingers trembling slightly, and lifted the box just enough to peek inside. What I saw made my stomach twist. This wasn't a gift, and it wasn't trash. It was something that could change everything I thought I knew about my daughter, about her world, about the life she was quietly building behind closed doors. I swallowed hard, the air suddenly thick, and realized I had no idea who Zoe really was. I set the box on the driveway, my hands shaking more than I wanted to admit. The sunlight glinted off the metal edges inside, and I finally saw it clearly. A camera. Not some casual point and shoot, but one of those high-end professional cameras with lenses that could cost more than my car. My mind raced. Zoe had never shown much interest in photography beyond the occasional selfie or Instagram post. Why would she hide a camera like this in the trunk? And then there was the envelope tucked underneath, thick with papers I couldn't quite make out from here. I opened it carefully. My eyes scanned the first page, and the world shifted on its axis. It wasn't just a camera, it was evidence. Names, dates, locations, all tied to something I couldn't yet process. A part of me wanted to drop the box, slam the trunk, and pretend I'd never seen a thing. But another part, the part that had spent years teaching Zoe right from wrong, protecting her, trusting her, couldn't. I needed to understand. And suddenly, the day that started with nothing but sunshine and coffee had turned into something I wasn't prepared for. I took a deep breath, shoved the box back in the trunk, and knew one thing for certain. My relationship with Zoe was about to change. Maybe forever. I spent the drive to the car wash in a daze, the box heavy in the trunk like it carried the weight of secrets I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The radio played some morning talk show, but the chatter felt distant, like I was hearing it underwater. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than usual, knuckles white. Every red light felt like a countdown to a revelation I didn't want but couldn't avoid. When I got to the car wash, I pulled into a quiet corner and sat there for a moment, staring at the hood of her car. The smell of soap and engine cleaner was familiar, comforting almost, but it clashed with the pit forming in my stomach. I knew I couldn't just leave it in the trunk. I had to look closer. I opened it again. The camera was cold in my hands, the lens reflecting the fluorescent light from the car wash. The envelope, its contents now clearer, was filled with photos. Not casual snapshots, not the ones a teenager posts on Instagram, but professional-level images. Some were candid, almost spy-like, of people I didn't recognize. And then I saw her handwriting on the notes attached to a few. Dates, locations, names. My heart stopped. Zoe had been keeping tabs on something. Someone. My mind tried to rationalize. Maybe it was for a school project, a journalism class assignment. But the precision, the secrecy, the way she had hidden it in the trunk, it felt different, dangerous even. I backed away from the car, leaning against the hood. I remembered her as a little girl, the way she would run to me with scraped knees, tears in her eyes, expecting the world to make sense again because I was there. Now she was a woman, and suddenly the world felt bigger, colder, more complicated than I had imagined. I realized then that I didn't know my daughter as well as I thought. She had a life that I hadn't been a part of, choices she hadn't shared, risks I hadn't seen. And here I was, holding proof of it in my hands, powerless to stop the tide of revelation. I closed the trunk gently, almost reverently, and made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her yet. I needed to understand first, fully, before I could even think about what this meant for us. The car went through the wash, jets of water hammering against the metal, scrubbing away dirt. But I knew some things couldn't be washed off so easily. Not trust, not fear, not the quiet knowledge that nothing about our lives would ever be the same. I drove home in silence, the box tucked carefully under my seat, as if hiding it would somehow protect me from the truth inside. The city felt different today. The familiar streets, the cafes, the corner store, all somehow sharper, as if they were watching me, aware of what I had just discovered. I kept glancing at the box, the weight of it pressing into my leg like a constant reminder that nothing could stay normal. Back in the driveway, I sat on the hood of Zoe's car, sunlight baking my shoulders, and finally dared to open the envelope fully. The photographs spilled across my lap, each one a small window into a world I hadn't imagined my daughter inhabited. Some were of people I didn't know, clearly in situations where they didn't expect to be observed. Others were of locations I recognized: a coffee shop downtown, a local park, even her college campus, but taken in ways that suggested she had been watching from a distance, documenting every detail. I felt a mix of fear and awe. Zoe wasn't just experimenting with photography. She was meticulous, calculating, deliberate, and every page I turned, every photo I studied, confirmed it. She was chasing something bigger than herself, something I couldn't yet name. Then I noticed it, a note tucked between the photos. Her handwriting, small and precise. "I can't tell Dad yet. He'll think I'm reckless. But this matters. I have to see it through." My chest tightened. I could almost hear her voice, that mix of determination and defiance that had always been part of her. I'd raised her to be strong, independent, smart, and now she was all of that, but in ways I hadn't expected. She wasn't just hiding a camera, she was hiding a mission. I leaned back, running my hands through my hair, trying to make sense of it. Part of me wanted to knock on her door and demand answers. Part of me wanted to leave her to her secrets, hoping she'd come to me when she was ready. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore it. Whatever Zoe was involved in, it wasn't small, it wasn't harmless. I made a decision. I would follow her trail, not to punish her, not to control her, but to understand, to protect, to be the father I had always promised to be, even if it meant stepping into a world I didn't recognize. As I sat there, the engine of her car humming quietly, I realized something else. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about us, about trust, about the invisible line between a father and a daughter, and how easily that line could be tested when the truth finally came out. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the driveway, and I felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. Zoe's life, her secret life, was out there, and I was about to step into it, whether I was ready or not. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every distant siren, made my pulse spike. Zoe's room was empty, her bed neatly made, the posters still hanging on the walls, the scent of her shampoo lingering faintly. I wanted to believe she was just out with friends, like any normal college student, but the box in my car told a different story. By morning, I had made up my mind. I couldn't just wait for her to explain herself. I needed to see the evidence again, carefully, and maybe start piecing together what she was really doing. I went back to the photos, spreading them across the kitchen table. Every image felt like a clue, every note a breadcrumb leading deeper into a world I didn't know existed. The first photo I lingered on was taken at the park near her campus, a snapshot of a man sitting on a bench, eyes darting nervously. Zoe had circled a small symbol on his backpack, something I didn't recognize at first. Then there was another photo, taken a week later, showing the same man in a coffee shop, glancing over his shoulder. Someone was being followed, and my daughter was the one following him. A knot tightened in my chest. I had raised her to be fearless, resourceful, but this was bold, dangerous. My mind raced through worst-case scenarios, each one sharper than the last, but there was no hesitation in her notes, just dates, times, observations, connections. Zoe wasn't acting recklessly. She was calculating every move, anticipating every reaction. I realized then that I had underestimated her. All the years of guiding her, teaching her right from wrong, preparing her for the world. None of it had prepared me for the truth of who she was becoming. And the truth wasn't small. It was huge, almost incomprehensible. I made a quiet vow. I wouldn't confront her blindly. I would follow her trail, watch carefully, and intervene only if I had to. Because whatever this was, it was bigger than me, bigger than our little suburban life. And yet I knew one thing. I couldn't let her face it alone. I packed the photos carefully into the box, making sure not to disturb their order. As I locked the car, I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me like never before. I was no longer just a father on a Saturday morning errand. I was a man on a mission to protect, to understand, to bridge the gap between what I thought I knew and the extraordinary reality my daughter had created. The sun was climbing higher, and with every ray that hit the driveway, I felt the quiet tension building. Today, I would take the first real step into her world, and there was no turning back. I didn't wait for Zoe to come home. I drove her car, quietly, carefully, through the streets I thought I knew, tracing the paths hinted at in her notes. Each turn, each familiar intersection, felt charged with anticipation. I was no longer just a father going about errands. I was a shadow moving through my daughter's world, trying to understand the life she had kept from me. Her first location was a small art gallery tucked between a coffee shop and a bookstore downtown. From the outside, it looked ordinary, unassuming, just another place where people came and went. But the photos told a different story. Zoe had photographed someone inside, someone who clearly didn't belong to the casual weekend crowd. I parked a block away, heart pounding, and peered through the gallery window. There, behind a display of abstract paintings, I saw her, Zoe. She moved with quiet confidence, her eyes scanning the room, camera in hand, capturing moments with a precision that left me breathless. She didn't see me yet, and I hesitated to call out. I wanted to watch, to learn before disrupting whatever she was doing. I realized then just how much I had underestimated her. She wasn't just a student, or my little girl who scraped her knees and ran to me for comfort. She was a force, focused, fearless, and utterly determined. And what she was doing here, it wasn't play, it was investigation. A man stepped into frame, one of the people from her photos. He looked around nervously, clearly aware of something he didn't want anyone else to see. Zoe followed him with her lens, taking careful notes. My stomach churned. She was tracking him, following him, and I had no idea why. I stepped back, heart racing, trying to piece it together. My first instinct was to protect her, to tell her to stop, but then I saw it. The intensity in her eyes, the purpose in her movements. She wasn't in danger from recklessness. She was in control, more in control than I'd ever seen her. And whatever she was chasing, it mattered to her. I stayed long enough to memorize his movements, the timing, the small interactions she captured. And then I knew I had a choice. I could confront her and risk shattering her focus, or I could follow quietly, trust her instincts, and be the father who watched over her silently. I slid back into the driver's seat of her car, letting the engine hum beneath me, and made my decision. I would follow. I would protect. I would understand. Whatever Zoe was doing, I wasn't going to let her face it alone. And in that moment, the weight of the trunk, the weight of the box, the weight of all the secrets she had carried here, it felt less like a burden and more like a responsibility I was ready to bear. I followed her for hours that morning, keeping a careful distance. Every turn, every stoplight, every shadowed corner seemed like a piece of a puzzle I didn't yet understand. Zoe moved like she belonged to a world I had only glimpsed in fragments through her notes and photos. She wasn't just acting, she was orchestrating, like a conductor guiding a symphony that I was only beginning to hear. The trail led me to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The neighborhood was quiet, a few stray cats wandering under flickering streetlights, the hum of distant traffic like a muted warning. Zoe parked the car down the street, slipped inside, and I watched from behind a chain-link fence, heart hammering. Inside, the space was dim, the air thick with dust and the faint smell of oil and concrete. I could hear muffled voices, but not enough to make out what they were saying. And then I saw what she had been photographing. The man from the park, now surrounded by a group I didn't recognize, passing envelopes, glancing nervously around the room. The scene felt like something out of a thriller. My stomach twisted. Zoe's camera clicked softly in the shadows, her focus unshakable. She documented everything: the faces, the exchanges, the small gestures that told a story far larger than I had anticipated. I realized then that she wasn't just observing, she was gathering evidence. And the stakes were higher than I had imagined. I stepped closer, just enough to catch a clearer view, and that's when it happened. One of the men turned suddenly as if sensing something, and I froze. Zoe didn't notice. They never did, not with her precision, but my pulse spiked, fear gripping me. I had almost blown our cover, almost exposed her. I retreated behind the fence, taking deep, steadying breaths. My mind raced. This was bigger than school projects, bigger than photography. She was in the middle of something serious, something that could get her or me in real trouble if I wasn't careful. And yet, I couldn't feel anger, only awe. She had grown into someone I barely recognized, someone I had to respect, even from a distance. I realized that day that protecting her wouldn't mean controlling her. It would mean understanding her, following her, and trusting the instincts I had spent a lifetime teaching her to trust. As she slipped out of the warehouse, camera tucked under her arm, I stayed back, letting her lead, letting her world unfold. My mind replayed every moment, every photo, every note I had seen in the box. And I understood. This was the first time in her life that I wasn't guiding her. I was following. And for the first time I realized how much that scared and thrilled me. I didn't get home until sunset, and the city had already begun its nightly rhythm. Streetlights flickering on, car engines humming, the distant chatter of people winding down their day. Zoe's car sat in the driveway, innocent and still, but I knew the truth it carried. The camera, the box, the evidence of a life she had never told me about. I couldn't stop thinking about the warehouse, about the man she had been tracking, and the envelopes exchanged under the dim lights. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, something strong and amber, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the box once more. I didn't know where to start. Every photo, every note, every piece of evidence raised more questions than answers. Who was this man? Why was Zoe following him? Was she in danger? And yet, despite the fear curling in my chest, I felt a surge of pride. My daughter was brave, bold in a way I had never imagined. And she was meticulous, careful, smarter than anyone I had ever known. I decided to go through everything again, slowly, methodically. I spread the photos across the table, lining them up according to the dates and locations she had written. There was a pattern here, I could feel it, like the faint outline of a map appearing through fog. And then I saw it, a recurring symbol on the envelopes. The same symbol circled on her notes, the same one she had highlighted in the photos. It wasn't just a coincidence. Someone was involved in something organized, something bigger than I could immediately comprehend. I remembered the man at the park, the way he had glanced over his shoulder, clearly nervous, constantly checking his surroundings. And now, seeing these symbols repeated, it hit me. Zoe had stumbled onto something serious, something illicit, maybe even illegal. The thought made my stomach twist. But she wasn't reckless. She was calculating every move, photographing, documenting, and taking meticulous notes. I felt my phone buzz and nearly dropped it. It was a text from Zoe. "Back late. Don't worry." Simple, casual, innocent. But I knew better. She was hiding more than she let on. And I also knew that sending her a message back would make her suspicious, maybe even angry. She didn't need me questioning her yet. She needed me to understand, to protect, to follow. The night stretched long. I went through the envelope again and again, cross-referencing names, locations, and dates. Patterns emerged, meetings in odd places, handoffs of small packages, briefcases, gestures that seemed insignificant to an outsider but were clearly signals to those in the know. The realization hit me hard. Zoe was documenting a network, gathering proof, and possibly preparing for something bigger than even I could see. I tried to imagine how she had learned all of this, how she had hidden it so well from me, from her professors, from everyone. My chest tightened. I had always thought I knew her, thought I could predict her, thought I could keep her safe with a mixture of guidance and rules. But this was something else entirely. She wasn't just a student. She wasn't just my daughter. She was an investigator, a strategist, a quiet force moving through the shadows. And I had been blind to it. I poured another glass of whiskey, and this time I drank slowly, letting it burn down my throat, grounding me in the reality of what I had just discovered. I couldn't tell her how scared I was. Not yet. She needed her space, her autonomy. But I could prepare. I could observe. I could make sure she never faced this alone. Then I noticed something tucked under the stack of photos. A small flash drive, one I hadn't seen before. My curiosity and fear collided. I plugged it into my laptop, and a folder opened, filled with files labeled with dates and short descriptions. Video files, security footage, recordings, detailed notes, everything she had been documenting. I watched a few clips, careful to only peek. The man she had been following exchanged something with another individual, and the look on his face, the tension, the fear, the subtle nervousness, was unmistakable. He was involved in something illegal, something Zoe was quietly exposing. My pulse raced. This was no longer just a game of observation. This was evidence. Real, tangible evidence. And my daughter had it all. I felt a surge of protectiveness, like a cord connecting me to her across every mile, every risk she had taken without me knowing. But I also felt fear. Fear for her, for what she had taken on. Whoever this man was, whoever he was working with, they wouldn't take kindly to being followed, documented, or exposed. And Zoe was in the middle of it, alone. At least, she thought she was. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the wall, thinking about the father-daughter bond, about trust, about responsibility. I realized something crucial. I couldn't stop her from what she was doing. I couldn't force her into safety, but I could walk beside her. I could watch. I could intervene if the line was crossed, and I would, no matter what it took. Hours passed. The house grew quiet, the city outside quieter, and I finally leaned back, exhausted but resolute. Tomorrow, I would follow her again. I would trace her steps, observe the same locations, understand the network she had uncovered, and I would do it carefully, silently, because one wrong move could ruin everything she had worked for, or worse, put her in danger. I finally went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come easily. My mind replayed every image, every movement, every shadowed corner of the warehouse and the park. I knew one thing for certain. Nothing about this would ever be normal again. My daughter had grown into someone extraordinary, someone fearless, someone whose world I had only just begun to glimpse, and I had no choice but to step into it, carefully, quietly, fully. Tomorrow the hunt would begin in earnest, and for the first time in my life, I would follow my daughter into the unknown, knowing that when the truth revealed itself, everything we had shared as father and daughter would change forever. I woke before dawn, the house silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Sleep had barely touched me. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows, felt like a warning. Zoe's life, the one I had glimpsed through the photos, the notes, the videos, wasn't just secret, it was dangerous. And now, I was fully committed to stepping into her world, whether she wanted me there or not. I grabbed the car keys, slipped the box into the passenger seat, and drove quietly, retracing the route from yesterday. The streets were empty, the air crisp and damp with the promise of rain later in the day. I followed her notes, her carefully mapped locations, keeping my distance but never letting her out of my sight. I had to understand everything before confronting her. Every risk, every encounter, every shadow she had been navigating. The trail led me to a parking garage near downtown, a place she had photographed multiple times. From my vantage point across the street, I could see her slipping in and out of shadows, camera in hand, notebook tucked under her arm. She didn't notice me. She couldn't. This had to remain a silent observation, not interference. Inside the garage, the man from the warehouse appeared again. He wasn't alone. Another figure joined him, taller, broader, exuding a quiet menace that made my stomach tighten. They exchanged a briefcase, small gestures loaded with significance. Zoe moved slowly, deliberately, capturing every detail with precision. I held my breath. She was calm, collected, unshakable. But the moment one of the men looked up and caught a glimpse of movement, my movement, I froze. The taller man's eyes scanned the shadows. He paused, just for a moment, then turned back to his companion. I exhaled slowly, but my chest was still tight, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Zoe hadn't seen him. She hadn't seen me. And yet I realized that one careless step could blow the entire operation and put her in real danger. I decided then that I couldn't just watch. I needed to be closer, to understand fully, to protect her if the situation went sideways. I parked a little closer to the garage entrance, keeping the car engine silent, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed caution. But the father in me, the man who had promised to protect his daughter no matter what, pushed me forward. Inside, the garage smelled of oil, concrete, and something faintly metallic, like the undercurrent of danger in the air. I moved slowly along the perimeter, keeping to the shadows, trying to keep sight of both Zoe and the men. I saw her take a photo, write a note, adjust her angle, all while maintaining a quiet awareness I couldn't have imagined in her at her age. My pride battled with fear. She was extraordinary. But this could go wrong in an instant. Then, without warning, the taller man turned sharply, scanning the shadows again. Zoe froze mid-step, and for a heartbeat, I thought he had seen her. My stomach lurched. I was too far to intervene, too visible to yell, and too inexperienced in this shadowy game to know how to act. But instinct kicked in. I crept closer, crouching behind a concrete pillar, every muscle tense, ready to step in if necessary. The man's eyes swept past Zoe, and I exhaled with the force of relief I hadn't realized I'd been holding. She moved again, carefully, documenting, observing, calculating. She hadn't noticed my presence, but I realized something critical. I was learning from her. Every careful movement, every strategic pause, every quiet step taught me how to survive in her world. I wasn't just protecting her anymore. I was becoming part of her operation, in my own small, silent way. After what felt like hours, but was only minutes, Zoe finally stepped back, slipping into the shadows as the men left with their briefcase. She didn't glance around, didn't speak, didn't hesitate, and then she was gone from sight. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging, but I felt something else too. Awe. She was fearless, determined, and unflinching. She was also alone, and that alone terrified me. I waited until the men were out of sight, then followed her at a distance, through narrow alleys and side streets, finally watching her slip into a small cafe tucked away from the main roads. She took a seat by the window, opened her notebook, and began writing. I parked down the street, hidden from view, and observed. Every detail mattered. Every note, every expression, every careful movement was part of the puzzle. And then it hit me, fully, as I watched her. She wasn't just hiding a secret from me. She had become a part of a world I didn't understand. A world of strategy, risk, and danger that demanded respect and vigilance. My role wasn't to control her. It was to protect, to support, and to learn from her strength. For the first time, I truly understood what my daughter had become. And I realized something else. I would do anything to ensure she survived it, to ensure she succeeded, to ensure that whatever danger loomed over her world, I would be there, silently, steadfastly, no matter the cost. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the streets, and I stayed there watching, learning, protecting. I knew tomorrow would demand more courage, more vigilance, more understanding. But for now, I let myself admire her, my daughter, the woman who had grown before my eyes, into someone I barely recognized, someone I had to follow into the unknown. And in that quiet, shadowed street, I made a vow. No matter what came, no matter the danger, I would not let her face it alone. The next morning, the world seemed unnervingly calm, almost mocking me. Birds chirped outside the window. The streetlights flickered off one by one, and the city began its usual rhythm. But I knew better. I had followed Zoe into a world of shadows, secrets, and calculated danger, and the calm was a thin veneer over something far more volatile. I woke early, nerves taut, the events of the previous day still echoing in my chest. The images of the warehouse, the parking garage, the men with briefcases. They haunted me. I had replayed every movement, every detail, trying to memorize them, to prepare for what might come next. I couldn't leave her to navigate this alone. Not anymore. By mid-morning, I had parked across from her college campus, the box of evidence and her camera tucked safely in the passenger seat. I knew she was nearby, moving with the same quiet precision I had observed before. But today felt different. I sensed something in the air, subtle tension in the hum of the city, the way shadows seemed longer, darker. I saw her first in the campus library courtyard, camera slung over her shoulder, notebook in hand. She paused, scanning the area, clearly aware of her surroundings. She didn't notice me. She couldn't. I watched her move from shadow to shadow, pausing only to capture a detail I couldn't immediately understand. My pride and fear twisted together. She was brilliant, and yet she was walking a knife's edge. I followed at a distance, careful not to be seen. Then I saw him, the man from the warehouse and garage. He wasn't alone this time. He had an accomplice, someone whose presence made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. They moved quickly, speaking in hushed tones, glancing around with paranoia that suggested they knew something was off. My heart pounded. I couldn't let Zoe walk into danger unaware. I ducked behind a wall, watching her notebook fill with observations, photos, and notes. She was documenting them. The same men who had been exchanging envelopes, tracking their movements, their signals. I realized something that made my stomach twist. Zoe wasn't just observing. She was gathering evidence, preparing for something significant, something that could blow open a web of lies and illegal activity. And she had no idea I was watching. I debated what to do. Step in and risk exposing her? Stay back and let her handle it alone? The father in me screamed to act. The man who had spent decades learning, observing, surviving, whispered to wait. I decided on a compromise. I would be near enough to intervene if necessary, far enough to let her lead. The men moved closer to her, their pace quickening. Zoe didn't flinch. Her movements were deliberate, precise. She took a photo, adjusted her angle, moved silently to avoid detection. I felt my chest tighten. One wrong step, one glance the wrong way, and everything could unravel. I had to trust her instincts, but trust didn't erase fear. Suddenly, one of the men glanced in her direction and froze, as if sensing something was wrong. My heart stopped. Zoe froze too, instinctively ducking behind a column. I held my breath. They didn't see her, or me, but the tension was palpable. Every second stretched impossibly long, the kind of time where a single misstep could have consequences we weren't ready for. I edged closer, crouched behind a planter, feeling my pulse hammering in my ears. The taller man scanned again, slower this time, more deliberate. My fingers itched to reach for Zoe, to pull her out of danger, but I held back. This was her fight, her mission, her world. My role was protection, not interference. The men finally moved on, their attention drawn elsewhere, and Zoe exhaled softly, a sound so quiet I barely heard it over the city hum. She rose, resumed her work, taking meticulous notes and photos. I realized something crucial in that moment. She was fearless, yes, but she also trusted herself completely. She had trained for this in ways I couldn't have taught her, and my job was to honor that trust. I followed her as she left the courtyard, keeping a safe distance. The streets were busier now, students walking, cars passing, but she navigated with purpose, seamlessly blending into the environment. I marveled at her focus, the sharp intelligence in her eyes. She wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was someone operating on a level I hadn't imagined, someone whose courage demanded respect and careful observation. Then it happened. Around the corner, the men stopped abruptly. They were scanning the area, speaking quietly, but with urgency. Something had changed. My heart jumped. One of them turned sharply, looking directly in the direction where I had been hiding. I ducked instinctively, chest pounding, sweat prickling my skin. Zoe moved too, instinctively, slipping into the shadows, undetected. I followed her silently, relief mixing with awe. She didn't pause, didn't look back. Every move was deliberate, controlled, like a dancer in a dangerous performance. I realized something profound. She had grown beyond my ability to shield her. My protection couldn't be overt. It had to be silent, strategic, patient. We reached a quieter street, a small cafe tucked into a side lane. Zoe slipped inside, taking a corner booth. I stayed outside, visible from the window but careful, observing. She opened her notebook, her camera resting beside her, and began reviewing her photos, making notes, analyzing every detail. I finally understood the depth of what she was doing. She wasn't just uncovering a secret. She was navigating a network, documenting evidence, preparing for a confrontation I couldn't yet imagine. And I realized that my role had shifted entirely. I wasn't just a father watching from afar. I was a silent partner, a guardian in the shadows, ready to intervene only if the danger became real. Hours passed. The city moved around her, oblivious to the storm of strategy, risk, and intelligence unfolding in that tiny cafe corner. I remained outside, watching, learning, preparing. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Nothing about our relationship or our lives would ever be the same. And whatever threat loomed over her, I would face it with her, silently, steadfastly, and without hesitation. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and streetlights flickered on, I finally allowed myself to hope. My daughter was fearless, brilliant, and determined, and I would be there, in the shadows, ready for whatever came next. The morning after the cafe, the city seemed unusually still, as if holding its breath. I hadn't slept more than a few hours, the adrenaline from following Zoe and observing her shadowed world still coursing through my veins. Every noise, distant sirens, the hum of engines, even the soft rustle of leaves, felt magnified, warning me that something was coming. I drove slowly toward her campus, Zoe's car behind the wheel now still and waiting for her. The box of photos and the flash drive were tucked securely in the passenger seat, my mind spinning with the details I had memorized. I knew her patterns, the way she moved through the streets, how she shifted between shadows and sunlight, how she observed people without them realizing. But knowing her movements wasn't enough. Danger was a step ahead of us now. I saw her first from the corner of my eye, stepping out of the library courtyard with purposeful strides, camera in hand. She paused briefly at a crosswalk, scanning the street. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, caught someone across the way, a man from her notes. He didn't see her yet. My chest tightened. The way he moved, the subtle glance he cast around the intersection, told me he was aware someone might be watching, someone gathering information. My mind raced. Zoe didn't flinch. She moved gracefully, slipping into the shadows along the sidewalk, documenting the man with her lens. I followed from a distance, careful not to step into the frame, careful not to disrupt her rhythm. This was no longer casual observation. This was real risk. And every instinct screamed at me. One misstep and everything could unravel. The man noticed movement from the other side of the street, shifting his weight, hands moving subtly toward his coat pockets. My pulse spiked. Zoe, still unaware of my presence, adjusted her position, crouching slightly, focusing her lens on him. She didn't speak. She didn't hesitate. She just observed, precise, deliberate, unflinching. My pride warred with fear. Suddenly, the man moved quickly as if sensing something was amiss. He glanced around, his eyes sweeping over parked cars, street corners, and finally settling near where I was crouched. I ducked instinctively, heart hammering. Zoe froze mid-step, instinctively ducking behind a pillar. Time seemed to stretch infinitely. Every second was a question. Would he see her? Would he see me? Would this be the moment everything collapsed? Then the man stepped away, muttering something under his breath, and continued down the street with his companion. Zoe exhaled softly, still hidden in the shadows. I allowed myself a quiet sigh of relief, but I knew the danger wasn't over. It was only escalating. I stayed back, following her silently as she moved to another location, a small alley near the edge of campus. Her pace was deliberate, cautious, but she didn't stop documenting. Every gesture, every movement of the men, every subtle exchange she captured was evidence. I could feel the tension pressing in around us, This wasn't just about photography anymore. This was about survival. As we entered the alley, a shadow detached itself from the far end. A figure moved toward Zoe at an alarming speed. I recognized him immediately. The taller man from the warehouse, the one who had been exchanging envelopes. Panic surged, but I kept my distance, knowing that stepping forward now could expose both of us. Zoe froze, camera raised instinctively. The man's eyes scanned the alley, narrowed, and then locked on her. He started walking faster. Her breathing shifted subtly, but she didn't run. She didn't panic. She just adjusted her stance, camera ready, notes in hand. I realized then that she had anticipated this, planned for it, and was prepared. My fear didn't dissipate, it intensified, but I marveled at her courage. The man stopped just a few feet away, his gaze sharp, measuring. Zoe didn't flinch. She raised her camera, snapping a photo, capturing the moment with precision. The man's expression flickered. Anger? Recognition? And he stepped back slightly, retreating into the shadows. Zoe exhaled, lowering her camera, and I felt a wave of relief. She had survived the first real confrontation. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. I stayed in the shadows, observing, understanding. The tension hadn't passed. It had only intensified. Whoever these men were, they were aware now. And Zoe had made herself visible to them, even if only briefly. By the time we returned home, the adrenaline had left my body exhausted but alert. I watched her slip inside, still unaware I had followed her the entire time. She set her camera down, opened her notebook, and began reviewing her photos, her focus unbroken, undeterred. I realized something profound in that moment. Zoe had crossed a line. This wasn't just investigation anymore. This was confrontation, and it was only going to get more dangerous. I leaned against the kitchen counter, hands gripping the edge, and understood my role clearly. I couldn't protect her from everything, but I could be present, alert, and ready to intervene if the danger escalated. I would be the shadow she hadn't asked for, but desperately needed. And I knew one thing: whatever came next, nothing about our lives would ever be the same. The city outside moved on, oblivious to the storm brewing quietly in our lives. But inside, the air was thick with anticipation. Tomorrow, I knew, would demand even more courage. And we had to be ready. Together. The next morning, I woke with a tight knot in my chest, the kind that refused to loosen no matter how much coffee I poured or how deep I breathed. Zoe had slipped out early, as she always did, leaving her car humming quietly in the driveway. I hadn't slept well, replaying the alley confrontation over and over. That taller man, the one from the warehouse, wasn't just a threat. He was a warning. He had seen her, and now he knew someone was watching her. I couldn't let this go any further. I followed her discreetly, careful not to be seen, keeping my distance, but the weight of responsibility pressed into my shoulders like a boulder. The streets were eerily quiet, the usual morning rush subdued, almost as if the city itself sensed the tension that clung to us. Zoe moved with her usual precision, camera slung over her shoulder, notebook tucked under her arm, every step measured, deliberate. She didn't glance around, didn't hesitate, and I realized again how much she had grown beyond the girl I had known. Her trail led to an old office building downtown. She paused at the entrance, glanced up at the faded sign, then slipped inside. I waited across the street, straining to see, my heart hammering in my chest. This was new territory for both of us. The photos and notes had taken me this far, but beyond that door, I had no idea what awaited. Inside, the building smelled faintly of dust and stale coffee. Zoe moved silently, camera in hand, capturing evidence of people coming and going. Briefcases exchanged, signals passed, and then she froze. Across the lobby, a figure emerged, the man from the alley, followed by another, someone I hadn't seen before, taller, broader, radiating a quiet menace. Their eyes swept the room, alert, searching, and then they spotted her. Time seemed to slow. My chest tightened. Zoe instinctively ducked behind a marble column, camera snapping rapidly, notes scribbled in real time. Her breathing was steady, controlled. My own breath came in shallow bursts. I wanted to run in, grab her, pull her out, but I couldn't. Not yet. My presence would blow everything, put her in more danger than she already faced. The taller man moved closer, scanning the columns, his steps deliberate, menacing. I watched from a shadowed corner, my hands gripping my coat pockets, heart racing. Zoe moved again, slipping from column to column, capturing every detail, her focus unshakable. I realized something then. She was fearless, yes, but her bravery wasn't reckless. She had anticipated every move, planned every angle, and she wasn't going to back down. Suddenly, a chair scraped against the floor. The men froze. Zoe's eyes flicked toward the sound, camera snapping instinctively. The taller man's gaze shifted slightly, narrowing. My stomach twisted. This was it. The first real, tangible moment where she was truly exposed. Without thinking, I stepped forward, keeping low, careful to remain in the shadows. My presence was subtle, but enough that I could intercept if needed. One misstep, one sudden movement from either side, and everything could erupt. My pulse hammered, every nerve on edge. The men moved toward her, slower this time, methodical. Zoe crouched, camera raised, notes ready. She didn't panic, didn't hesitate. And then I saw it, the moment she had been waiting for. One of the men reached for something, a small envelope, and in that instant, Zoe lunged, capturing it with her camera, snapping multiple shots, her hands moving with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this 1,000 times. The man cursed under his breath, eyes flashing with anger, and I realized how close we had come to a confrontation that could end disastrously. But Zoe didn't falter. She slipped into the shadows, camera and notes secure, evidence safely documented. My chest ached with pride and fear. She had faced the threat head-on and survived. We moved quickly, side by side now, though she didn't know I had followed her. My mind raced, trying to plan the next steps. Whoever these men were, they wouldn't let this go. And whatever she had captured in that lobby would only escalate the danger. I knew we had to act carefully, deliberately, and together, even if she didn't yet realize I was in her world now. By the time we reached the street outside, sunlight pouring down and reflecting off the pavement, Zoe paused, finally looking around, pulling a small notebook from her bag. I stayed across the street, silent, invisible, but fully aware of every movement. I could see the determination in her eyes, the spark that had always been there but now burned brighter than ever. I realized something crucial. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. This was a confrontation with reality. The network she had uncovered, the evidence she had gathered, had made her a target, and I had a choice: to step fully into her world, to protect her from the shadows, or risk losing her to the dangers she had been quietly navigating alone. I chose the shadows. I chose to follow, to protect, to intervene only if necessary, because I knew one thing: whatever happened next, we would face it together. And for the first time, I felt the full weight of what it meant to be her father, not just to guide her, not just to advise her, but to be a silent force in her world, ready to act when the moment demanded it. The city moved around us, oblivious to the storm that had begun. But I knew, deep in my bones, that the confrontation had only just begun, and I would not let my daughter face it alone. Not now, not ever. The night fell heavy and humid, the city humming with life but carrying an undertone I couldn't ignore. Every car that passed, every muffled conversation drifting from the streets, felt loaded with tension. Zoe's trail had led us further than ever before, into the heart of the city's underbelly, a place I had never imagined she would navigate, let alone alone. I followed her silently, careful to remain unseen, heart pounding with every step. She moved with that same calculated precision I had come to admire, slipping between alleyways, shadows curling around her like a protective cloak. Her camera swung lightly over her shoulder, notebook tucked securely, every movement deliberate. I had memorized her patterns by now, but the stakes were higher tonight. I could feel it in the tightness in my chest, in the way every instinct screamed caution. Her destination was an abandoned shipping yard near the docks. Rusted containers towered like silent sentinels, and the smell of salt and diesel filled the air. The faint sound of water lapping against the pier created an eerie rhythm, almost like a countdown. Zoe paused briefly at the edge of a container, camera raised, capturing every detail of the men who had been following her movements for days. I crouched behind a stack of crates, keeping my presence invisible, but ready. The two men, the taller one and his accomplice, were there, exchanging something small and metallic, briefcase forgotten for a moment. They didn't see Zoe, they didn't see me, but the air vibrated with danger, each second stretching into a long, tense beat of fear. Zoe moved slowly, carefully, capturing everything. Her notes were precise, detailing names, appearances, subtle movements, even the direction of their gaze. I marveled at her composure. She wasn't afraid. She had never been reckless, and tonight, that control saved her life multiple times already. Suddenly, a shadow fell across her path. My heart jumped. One of the men had shifted positions, closing in. She froze instinctively, camera held at the ready. I could see the tension in her body, every muscle coiled like a spring. For a moment I thought she might run, but she didn't. She took a deliberate step sideways, slipping into the shadows, keeping the man in her lens the entire time. I realized then how much she had grown beyond the daughter I knew. She wasn't just brave, she was strategic, calculating, capable of facing danger I hadn't imagined she could. And yet I also realized that this bravery carried immense risk. One misstep now, one glance in the wrong direction, and everything could fall apart. The taller man turned suddenly, scanning the yard, eyes sharp, aware that something wasn't right. My pulse spiked. I could see the subtle shift in his stance, the slight raise of his shoulders, the tightening of his hands. They were on edge, and Zoe had unknowingly pushed them to that point. I stepped closer, careful to remain hidden, ready to intervene if necessary. My heart pounded in my ears, adrenaline sharp as knives. This was no longer observation. This was preparation, protection, survival. Every instinct in me screamed to move, to act, to pull her to safety. But I hesitated, knowing that stepping into the light now could jeopardize everything she had worked for, everything she had uncovered. Suddenly, the taller man moved faster, heading directly toward where Zoe had been standing moments ago. She pivoted, camera snapping, capturing a perfect shot of the exchange between the men. Then, without warning, the shorter man lunged toward her from behind a container. My stomach dropped. I bolted, sprinting from my hiding spot, shouting her name. Zoe turned, eyes wide, camera still raised. The shorter man froze, startled by my sudden appearance. The taller man turned, realization dawning in his expression. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Zoe didn't panic. She took a step back, sliding the camera into her bag with precision. And for the first time, she looked at me. Relief, fear, and trust all flashed across her face in an instant. I moved closer, keeping my stance protective, blocking the shorter man from advancing any further. The taller man cursed under his breath, assessing the situation. Realizing he had underestimated both of us, he signaled to his accomplice, and they retreated, disappearing into the shadows of the shipping yard. I exhaled, my body trembling from the rush of adrenaline, fear, and relief. Zoe stepped toward me, notebook clutched in her hand, eyes blazing with determination. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said softly, almost accusingly. But there was no anger, just acknowledgement. "I couldn't stay away," I replied, voice tight. "Not after what I've seen, not after what's happening to you." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "I need you to stay close, but don't interfere, not unless it's life or death." I realized in that moment that this was no longer about protecting her from normal dangers or teaching her lessons she needed to learn. This was about being present, being a shadow in her world, ready to act only when necessary, but trusting her instincts every step of the way. As we left the shipping yard, walking through the quiet streets under the cover of night, I felt a new kind of bond between us. It was forged in fear, respect, and the unspoken understanding that we were facing something bigger than either of us had anticipated. And I knew, deep down, that the events of tonight were only the beginning. Tomorrow, the game would escalate, and we would face it together. The next morning, the city felt sharper, more alive, as if it knew the tension hanging over us. Every honking car, every footstep on the sidewalk, even the hum of the streetlights pulsing on overhead seemed amplified, warning me that nothing would be simple today. Zoe had been moving like a shadow for days, collecting evidence, documenting, observing. But last night had changed everything. The men had realized she wasn't alone. They'd seen someone interfering, and now I knew the stakes had skyrocketed. I parked a few blocks from her college campus, heart hammering, eyes scanning every pedestrian, every passing vehicle. Zoe had left her car at home this morning, moving on foot, blending with the throngs of students. She looked ordinary, casual, yet I knew better. Every step, every glance she made was deliberate, calculated. She was hunting, or being hunted, and I was finally fully in her world. She led me to a small cafe tucked away on a side street, one she had photographed repeatedly in her notes. I ducked into a shadow across the street, keeping watch. Her camera rested lightly in her hands, notebook open, eyes scanning the room with hawk-like precision. And then I saw them, the two men from the shipping yard. They weren't subtle anymore. They were moving deliberately, scanning the area, clearly searching. My stomach dropped. This wasn't observation. They were hunting. Zoe noticed them almost immediately. Her posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable, the way she adjusted her bag and camera showing readiness. She wasn't afraid, but she was aware. Every movement was deliberate, controlled. I felt a surge of pride, even as my pulse raced with fear. She had trained for this in ways I couldn't have anticipated. I followed her silently as she left the cafe, weaving through alleyways, blending into shadows. The men followed, keeping distance but persistent. Every step I took was measured, careful not to expose her or myself. And then Zoe paused at a narrow side street. She crouched slightly, snapping a photo of the two men as they passed, noting every detail in her notebook. I realized then the depth of what she had been doing. This wasn't just investigation. This was strategy, confrontation, and risk. She wasn't only documenting these men, she was exposing them, drawing patterns, gathering proof. And if they realized what she had, the consequences could be catastrophic. Suddenly, one of the men slowed, glancing toward where I had been hiding. My pulse spiked. Zoe froze, camera still raised. I knew I had to act quickly. I moved closer, keeping low, positioning myself behind a dumpster so that if either man made a move, I could intervene. My body was tense, muscles coiled like springs. Every instinct screamed caution, but every fatherly instinct screamed protection. The taller man's eyes swept the area, sharp, calculating. He paused, then nodded subtly to his accomplice. They split, one circling the block, the other advancing directly toward Zoe's last known position. I held my breath. Zoe stepped forward, camera snapping rapidly, capturing evidence of the man moving into the frame. Her movements were fluid, calculated, confident, but vulnerable. I could see it in the way she adjusted her stance, how she didn't run but subtly angled herself for escape. When the man approached, I stepped out from my shadow, positioning myself between him and her. The taller man's eyes widened in recognition, realization dawning. He cursed under his breath, taking a step back. His companion, a few yards away, also froze, clearly unsure of the unexpected presence. Zoe didn't flinch. She lowered her camera slightly but kept her gaze steady. "Step away," she said, voice calm but commanding. The authority of someone who knew what she had and what was at stake. The man hesitated. Then, slowly, deliberately, he retreated, signaling his companion to do the same. They disappeared into the shadows, leaving us in a tense, eerie silence. I exhaled, the relief washing over me, though my body still trembled. I turned to Zoe. She looked at me, eyes blazing, face flushed but controlled. "I knew you'd be here," she said softly. "I just didn't want you to get caught up." "You didn't think I'd follow you?" I replied, voice tight. "Not after what's happening to you? Not after what I've seen?" She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay," she said finally. "We do this together from now on. No more shadows, no more solo runs." The weight of her words hit me. Everything had changed. Our dynamic had shifted from father and daughter to partners in a dangerous mission, navigating a network that had already tried to intimidate us. I realized that my role wasn't just protection anymore, it was collaboration, strategy, silent vigilance. As we walked together through the streets, camera and notes in hand, I felt a new kind of bond forming, tempered by fear, respect, and trust. The city around us moved on, oblivious to the storm that had just begun to reshape our lives. But I knew, deep in my bones, that the confrontation with the network was only beginning, and this time we would face it together, side by side, ready for whatever came next. The night sky darkened, streetlights flickering on, casting long shadows across the pavement. And I knew nothing about our lives or our relationship would ever be the same again. The next morning, fog rolled over the city, thick and heavy, muffling the usual hum of traffic and distant chatter. It felt almost like the world was holding its breath, a warning I couldn't ignore. Zoe had left early, camera and notebook in hand, and I followed, silent as ever, heart hammering. Yesterday's confrontation had changed everything. The men had seen someone interfering. Now, every step she took carried risk, and I was no longer just a father observing. I was a participant, a shadow moving through her dangerous world. Her trail led to an old government office building, abandoned years ago but still structurally sound, a place she had photographed in her notes countless times. She moved with practiced precision, slipping past broken windows and rusted doors, pausing only to take photographs and jot notes. I followed behind, keeping low, careful not to startle her or draw attention. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust, and the faint smell of mold. The sound of our footsteps echoed, reminding me how vulnerable we were in this empty building. Zoe's eyes scanned the space with a calm intensity, camera moving like an extension of her body. She crouched behind a metal beam, capturing the movement of the men she had been tracking for weeks. I could see the same too from the shipping yard, the taller man and his accomplice, carrying files and packages, unaware that we were watching. I realized in that moment just how skilled Zoe had become. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't panicked. She was precise, strategic, and fearless in a way that left me breathless. And yet, beneath the awe, fear gripped me. One misstep now, one sudden movement, and she could be discovered. Then she paused, raising a hand for me to stop behind the shadows. Her eyes locked with mine for a split second, a silent signal. I froze. She moved forward carefully, camera snapping rapidly, documenting files, packages, and subtle details I hadn't noticed before. And then she crouched, opening a small folder she had slipped from one of the men's bags while they weren't looking. I held my breath. Inside were documents, names, dates, account numbers, and coded transactions. It was more than evidence. It was the core of whatever network these men were running. She had uncovered something massive, something that could take down the operation if exposed to the authorities. My heart pounded at the magnitude of what she had in her hands. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked. I froze, scanning the room, and saw the taller man turning in our direction. His eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows. Zoe crouched low, camera snapping as she retreated slowly. My pulse raced. I knew this was the moment everything could go wrong. I stepped forward quietly, moving behind her, ready to intervene. She glanced back at me, nodding slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement that we were in this together now. The man's gaze swept past us, just barely missing the corner where we crouched. My hands were tight around the notebook, my knuckles white. Zoe exhaled softly, moving with careful precision, leading us away from immediate danger. Once we were out of sight, she opened the folder fully, revealing even more. Maps, names, connections, and evidence that could dismantle the network if exposed properly. She looked at me, eyes blazing with determination. "We have everything," she said, voice steady, almost eerily calm. "But they'll know someone's onto them now. We have to act carefully. One mistake and—" "I know," I interrupted softly. "But we're not doing this alone anymore. Not just you. I'm with you, Zoe. Every step." She studied me, then nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. "Okay, together then. We can't make a mistake. Not this time." We spent the rest of the day planning. Using the documents and photos, we mapped the network, identifying key players, locations, and timing. The scope of what Zoe had uncovered was staggering, but the more I understood, the more I realized just how dangerous it was. These men weren't petty criminals. They were organized, smart, and ruthless, and we were now fully in their crosshairs. By evening, we had a plan, We would secure the evidence, document everything meticulously, and then alert the authorities in a way that minimized risk. But it wasn't just about law enforcement. It was about survival, for Zoe, for me, and for the fragile trust that had just begun to solidify between us. As night fell, we returned home, the weight of the day pressing down on us. The streets were quiet, shadows stretching long under the streetlights. I glanced at Zoe, exhausted but unwavering. "You've done something incredible," I said softly, "but promise me something. No more running alone. Ever." She smiled faintly, eyes tired but resolute. "I promise," she said. "But we do this together now. You and me. All the way." I realized then that our relationship had shifted completely. We weren't just father and daughter anymore. We were partners, navigating a dangerous shadowed world that demanded courage, intelligence, and trust. And for the first time, I felt confident, not just in our ability to survive, but in our ability to win. Tomorrow, we would take the next step, and the network would finally know that someone was watching, someone who wasn't afraid, someone who wouldn't back down. And I knew, deep in my bones, that together, we could face whatever came. The dawn was gray and heavy, low clouds pressing against the city like a warning. I didn't sleep. I hadn't slept in days. But that wasn't new. The difference today was purpose. Zoe and I weren't just following a trail anymore. We were stepping into the final confrontation. Every nerve in my body screamed tension, but beneath it, a sense of quiet resolve anchored me. We had evidence, strategy, and the one thing these men underestimated: the bond between a father and his daughter. We met at our usual spot, car parked in the shadows, box of photos and folders of evidence tucked safely in the passenger seat. Zoe slid in beside me, camera resting across her lap, notebook open, eyes sharp and unflinching. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly, voice steady but charged. "I've never been more ready," I replied, and I meant it. We followed the coordinates in her notes to the warehouse, the same one where she had first tracked the taller man. But this time we weren't just observers. We were participants. We moved silently through alleyways, crouched behind crates, our breathing steady, nerves taut. Every step felt amplified, the world shrinking down to the two of us and the danger we were about to face. Inside, the men were already there, moving with the confidence of those who think they're untouchable. But we had preparation on our side. Zoe had mapped their every movement, memorized their habits, and captured evidence that could dismantle them completely. We weren't walking in blind. We were walking in calculated. I stayed slightly behind her as she navigated the shadows, camera snapping, notebook ready. She moved like a ghost, fluid and deliberate, every action precise. And then she froze, signaling me to stop. Ahead, one of the men was handling packages, while the taller one paced nearby, scanning the room with suspicion. This was it, the culmination of weeks of observation, documentation, and silent vigilance. We had the proof we needed. The risk was monumental, but hesitation could cost everything. Zoe stepped forward first, camera snapping photos of documents and packages, capturing every angle. I flanked her silently, ready to intervene if they noticed. Suddenly, the taller man's gaze locked on something. A shadow, a movement. His eyes swept over the crates and stopped on us. Time slowed. The shorter man followed his line of sight. Zoe froze, every muscle tense. I stepped slightly forward, signaling silently with my hand for her to move. The taller man lunged. I reacted instinctively, placing myself between him and Zoe. He swore, catching me off guard with his size and aggression. But I held my ground. Zoe, calm and unshaken, raised her camera, snapping a rapid series of photos, capturing evidence of his identification, movements, and aggression. The fight didn't last long, but it was chaotic. Shouts, the scrape of metal on concrete, the smell of dust and sweat filling the air. I moved strategically, blocking and maneuvering, keeping him away from Zoe while she continued documenting. Every shot precise, every note careful. The adrenaline was intoxicating, fear and pride mingling in a way I had never experienced before. Finally, the taller man paused, assessing the situation. He had underestimated us, His accomplice was no longer moving confidently, his advantage gone. Zoe and I exchanged a glance, silent acknowledgement, mutual understanding. Then decisively, the taller man and his accomplice backed off, disappearing into the shadows, their plan foiled by the unexpected combination of courage, intelligence, and preparation. We exhaled, relief mingling with adrenaline. Zoe turned to me, eyes blazing but calm. "We did it," she said softly. "We've got everything we need. They can't touch us now." I nodded, heart pounding, chest tight. We did it together, and that's the part that matters most. We carefully collected the documents, photos, and evidence, making sure nothing was left behind. Every detail was accounted for, every angle documented. Zoe had done the lion's share, but I had protected her when it mattered most. Together we had turned fear into strategy, danger into opportunity. Back in the car, quiet settled between us, not uncomfortable, but profound. The city stretched out in the morning light, unaware of the storm we had survived, the network we had exposed, and the bond that had deepened beyond words. Zoe reached over, resting a hand briefly on mine. "Thanks," she said simply, "for trusting me, for being here." I smiled, a rare, relieved smile. "No, thank you, for showing me how capable you are, for letting me be part of this, your world." We drove home slowly, the weight of the past weeks lifting slightly, replaced by a new understanding. Nothing would ever be the same, not our relationship, not our lives. But now we had proof, evidence, and trust. We had faced danger together, and we had won. Later, at home, Zoe carefully stored the camera, notes, and evidence, glancing at me with a mix of pride and affection. I realized then that the danger had not just revealed the truth about the network we exposed. It had revealed the truth about us. We had grown stronger, braver, closer. The fear that had once held us apart was gone, replaced by respect, trust, and the unshakable knowledge that we could face anything. The city outside was waking up. Streetlights flickered off, traffic hummed, life moved on. But for Zoe and me, the world had shifted irrevocably. We had survived, we had triumphed, and we had done it together. I looked at her, and she looked at me. And in that quiet moment, I understood something profound. No matter what came next, nothing could break the bond we had forged in shadows, danger, and trust. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm, safe, victorious. Not because the threat was gone entirely, but because we had faced it side by side. And that, I realized, was everything. We had begun as father and daughter. We emerged as partners, unstoppable, unbreakable, and ready for whatever came next.